sewing machine. Sewing machine.
When I was a young child, I learned a lesson, and that lesson is still with me today. I want to tell you about that. Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and our honored guest. Bienvenue, welcome. That's my only French that I know, so welcome. Raise your hand if you had a sewing machine when you were growing up. Maybe your mom, your grandmother. Now keep your hand up if you knew how to thread and use the sewing machine. Okay, awesome. Some of you, okay. All right, hands down. So when I was a kid, we had a great sewing machine in our house. And the reason I say it's great is that it was like a little desk area that looked like nothing more than a desk, but it opened up, and deep inside there was this giant sewing machine that would come out, and the pedal goes on the floor, and it was, to me, it was amazing. As a child, I was not allowed to touch it, so I asked my mom if she would show me how to use the sewing machine. My mom taught me how to thread the sewing machine, how to make a bobbin and put the bobbin in a little switch plate underneath. And so I was allowed to use the sewing machine because I could do a simple stitch, I could do an applique and a few things like that. So it was pretty cool. The sewing machine, by the way, is, a few of you that have threaded it, you know it's the most convoluted kind of procedure ever. The thread does not go straight from the thread over to the needle. It goes through a series of hooks, and there's little pulleys and round things and like springs, and it's very convoluted. So it does take a while to master the art, because if you get a thread jam, it's like worse than the worst paper jam ever. And the thread gets all mashed up in there and you can get it all out. So fast forward to 6th grade. I'm 12 years old, and I luck out, and for home ec, I get Mrs. Fiandaca. Now, Mrs. Fiandaca is, to me, 2 steps below God. You've got God, Princess Diana, and Mrs. Fiandaca. Mrs. Fiandaca was the head of the home ec department for all of the school system, and she was my teacher for home ec. So I wanted to impress her, and I was very impressed by her. She wore the kind of like power skirt suit with the big bow tie cravat kind of thing. She was awesome, and she had hair that was incredible. So, which appeals to me with my profession. So Mrs. Fiandaca gives us our class project, which is to make a duffel bag. Now, I know how to sew really well, so my duffel bag project needs to be really, really good. Either my duffel bag needs to be bigger, or maybe smaller, something like really different and more unique than everyone else's duffel bag. So I decide, with Mother's Day coming up, as Mother's Day is coming up right now, I'm going to make a tiny little travel duffel bag for my mom, and it will hold cosmetics. It'll be lined and fluffy and really cute, and it will be so small that it's very intricate, and it will show off my talent for sewing on the sewing machine. So we are all sent off to the fabric store to buy our respective fabrics, and we are to bring it back in the next class for Mrs. Fiandaca's approval. So I go and I find this amazing fabric. It's like sort of Wedgwood, periwinkle blue, and it's got little flowers. It's quilted and it has lining, and to me it's like the most beautiful fabric I've ever seen. Certainly it'll be better than everyone else's. So we get back to class. Everyone puts their fabric like in a row, and they're standing there in front of it. Mrs. Fiandaca says, okay, Chris, denim, great. Okay, Colleen, denim, great. And everyone's kind of doing the same, so like a book bag or something very basic. And I'm thinking, okay, I am set. Mine is going to be the coolest. So they get to the end, and I was taught not to brag or, just be modest, be cool about things. Don't try to assert yourself as outclassing people, even though obviously in this situation I was outclassing everybody. So I stood back a little bit. I didn't say anything. I didn't walk up with my fabric and hold it down in front of Mrs. Fiandaca. I just let her come across it at the end. She picked it up and she looked up and noticed that it had to be mine. I was the only person left. And she set it down. I was so proud of myself. Little did I know, all of my confidence was about to be completely smashed. by Colleen, who is now standing right behind me. Now, Colleen was like the poster for Flashdance. She had like that sweatshirt that was off the shoulder and the big belt off the opposing hip, and she was really cool. The bangs were sprayed up in the air, and she's standing right behind me, like her mouth is just inches next to my ear. And as Mrs. Fiandaca holds that beautiful fabric up, Colleen says, is that fabric a guy's fabric? I would have preferred to die right there at 12 years old than to have said, oh yeah, that's mine. So I didn't say anything. Mrs. Fiandaca did not miss a beat, of course, because she's so close to God. Mrs. Fiandaca said, oh, well, this fabric is beautiful. With this fabric, it's got 2 layers of fiber fill. It's got a sateen lining built in, so Matt will not have to put a lining, but the rest of you will. And this will really hold its plushness because it's quilted. So the lesson that I learned was that no matter if you feel down or up or wherever you feel, it can change in an absolute moment. So whenever I'm down, I just think of Colleen, Mrs. Fiandaca's class, and know that that could change in an absolute moment with one person's sentence or maybe just a single word. I'm also here to say that that travel cosmetic case is as plush as ever. My mom still uses it today. Ms. Toastmaster and fellow Toastmaster, thank you so much.